how we roll, man. Some rock, some win, some roll, man. Some rock, some win, some roll, man. Some rock, some win, some roll, man. Some rock, some don't win, don't win, man.
Hi, my name is Loris Crow, and we are executing a Showtime. Zig SHOWTIME is a show and a community for makers. Watch the show to learn about interesting projects, enjoy the Discord server to share what you're working on, and to collaborate with other members of the community. And if that's not your style or you're new to Zig, make sure to check the other Zig communities to find one that suits you best. So, hello everyone, episode number 29, second episode for Zigtember, but today is going to be an episode basically all dedicated not to Zig really, but to another community, the Handmade community. So let me start with the news section before we jump into the core of the episode. And I guess my only news item is a complaint because finally the United States has reopened travel, or rather has announced that will reopen travel from Europe towards the United States. The problem is that they said it's going to be sometimes in the beginning, in early November, which is annoying because it's good, but not good enough, right? So we'll see. In any case, I am on the lookout for more news to see if I can book a last minute trip or something. Anyway, let's jump into the main topic, which is going to be a nice chat with the Handmade Network admin team. So let me bring them on screen. Hello, everyone. Welcome. So I guess maybe you should all introduce yourselves.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having us on, Loris. My name is Ryan Fleury. I'm one of the Handmade Network admin team members. I work generally on games, engines, and tools. Some of the projects I've worked on are the Dion Systems project and the Melodist and Telescope. So that's me, and then I'll hand it off.
Yeah, I'm Ben Visnes. I'm one of the other Handmade Network admins. I'm primarily specialized in web development and stuff, and I'm one of the primary developers on like the Handmade Network website and generally organizing lots of stuff within the community.
Hey, I'm Asaf. I'm also an admin on Handmade Network. I mainly do web dev, and I work with Ben on the Handmade Network website, and recently we released a new version completely rewritten from scratch in Go of the Handmade Network website.
Great. Yeah, I'll give an introduction for anybody who's unfamiliar for the premise of the Handmade Network community really quickly. So for people who caught the chat with Abner on Zig SHOWTIME, they'll know more about this, but Handmade Network is about providing an alternative to major industry culture trends, I would say. We care a lot about low-level programming and understanding the computer and understanding the stack that you're working on top of, because we think that'll actually lead to better software and will improve us as developers and will lead to a better world of computing. So we believe in reevaluating our technology, and we try to do that by fostering a community and conversation. So Asaf already mentioned the website, but we also have forums, Discord. We have fishbowl chats, which are sort of focused textual conversations between 5 or 6 people where everyone can watch and then people can swap in if they want. And we try to have interesting coffee chats and discuss computing as it is today and how it could be tomorrow. So yeah, we'll talk about this, but we host jams, we have a podcast, and there's a number of other features we have on the website. So that's kind of the point of Handmade Network. And obviously we don't run Handmade Seattle, but it was, we always try to promote it since it was started by the founder of Handmade Network, who's Abner. So that's a quick overview of Handmade Network. But yeah, happy to be here.
Nice. Glad to have you guys here. So is there So you mentioned, you introduced the Handmade Network. You mentioned some of the things that you guys are working on. Is there anything else before we talk about the jam?
Well, one thing that I think segues into the jam is that one of the things we really want to do with the Handmade Network is to foster the creation of software that sort of furthers these goals, software that is like made with a deeper understanding of the tech underneath, of the choices that it's making, like truly high quality software that respects the user, respects the computer, and sort of stands the test of time.
Nice.
So the jam is, I would say, like an extension of that.
Right. So at this point, I guess we have to ask the question. So what's the jam about? What can you tell us?
Yeah. So starting on Monday, we are doing what we are calling the Wheel Reinvention Jam on Handmade Network. This is the second jam that we've put on as a community, and the focus of this one is on sort of like going back to ideas that you've seen before that you didn't think got a fair shake, going back to just like stuff that you use today that you think is like stuck in the status quo and needs to be done better. And it's with many of these things, it seems like a large intractable problem that you might not even know how you'd begin to make better. But the jam is this like focused week-long opportunity to just get your foot in the door, to make a prototype, to explore the space, and to explore what would it actually take to do these things, and hopefully discover sort of a new perspective on these things along the way.
Right. So in practice, how does it work? Let's say that I am interested. What would be my first move?
Well, we have the page up on the website at handmade.network/jam that has all of the description of the jam and instructions on who can join. But basically, it's just find a project topic that interests you. We have some suggested things on the site, but broadly, like if there's a program that you use in your day-to-day that you're frustrated by, or there's like a workflow you do all the time where you don't think that your tools are meeting your needs, any of those things could be something that you feel is worthy of jamming on for a week to see how you could, sort of build a better replacement for it.
Right.
And then basically over the week then that the jam is running, with the time that you have, of course, because it is a week, it's a longer thing, but you just try and like scope out what is a prototype, what can actually explore this idea in a concrete way, and then work on it, set that goal for yourself over the week, and submit your results by the following Sunday. And then, we'll sort of like recap the results as a community after things are wrapped up.
Awesome. Yeah. You guys have you have also a Discord server. Do you have a dedicated channel for the jam, or where do you keep discussions for the jam in there?
Yeah, discussions about the jam will be happening on the Jam subforum within the Handmade Network website, because we have our own forum system, and in a couple dedicated channels on the Discord. And the Discord is going to have a dedicated showcase channel as well, where people can share just screenshots of their work as they're going, and where people can sort of maybe get inspiration or ideas for other things about the project. So
understood. Sorry, Ryan, you were saying?
Oh, no worries. I was going to say it might seem a little counterintuitive. I've heard this a couple of times. It's a little counterintuitive to think of reinventing wheels in 1 week, but something that I just realized as Ben was giving the introduction to the jam, that I think ties into it pretty well, is that I think especially those in the handmade and Zig communities will understand that there's always wheels to be frustrated by that we're constantly forced to use. And I think something that I'm certainly guilty of is rat holing on technical issues. So like whenever I'm working on something, if something's frustrating, I've got to reinvent. If something, is in my way, I've got to reinvent it. And that's the jam is kind of in a well-suited space because of the fact that it's trying to force you to see some cohesive idea through to the end instead of rat holing on every single possible reinvention you could do. So, because I think a lot of us reinvent stuff all the time, but you know, how much can you reinvent before you actually finish something and you know, bring it out into the world, and which is so important and often overlooked. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. Makes sense. So are you guys also participating to the jam, like as individually? What are your projects?
Yeah, Ryan, I think you go first.
Yeah, I'm going to be participating. So as I mentioned, I'm a member of the Dion systems team as well. And our whole project is to reinvent. I mean, our talk at Handmade Seattle last year was called The How and Why of Reinventing the Wheel. So it's, I don't know, the correlation between those two names was not on purpose. I don't think, yeah. But so we're all about reinventing computing tools and rethinking the way our computing architectures work in very fundamental ways relative to many other projects, I would say. And so one thing that we've developed is a data description language that's intended to give a standardized way to encode structured information inside of a text file effectively, which isn't the whole point of the project. It's actually just a metaprogramming tool for us, but it's a useful experiment for the kind of research we want to push towards. So I'm going to be building a viewer for that. That's like it's going to have full structured information about the file. So it'll have an in-memory representation of the effectively the abstract syntax tree of the parsed file, and then I can start sort of pushing the boundaries of what it means to render that kind of information inside of a file. So I was planning on trying to use that as a way to rethink the, I would say, day-to-day user data management. So for example, one thing that I've always wanted for myself is, you know, a simple way to manage things like graphs. You know, if I'm trying to lose weight or something, maybe I want to track daily health stats over time, and I'd like to graph some of those. I might want to-do lists, and I might even want to graph like which to-do items were done on which day. I might want images in line with the rest of the structured data, that kind of thing. And that ties into a lot of the further goals of the Dion project. It's not explicitly programming data, but it's the idea is that the structured data gets you a lot more than programming data too. So trying to experiment with that as a way to not only have a program that allows you to use structured data in this way, where you can very trivially manage all of your data with it, instead of, for example, storing them in text files or having to put them in Excel spreadsheets whenever you need to, and then having things spread out across like a number of places. That's sort of the idea, but I think it's going to serve a pretty good purpose long term for programming tooling as well. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to make it explicitly about that, because the point is to sort of think about user facing software. But it seemed like a good opportunity to share both a new user facing style application from probably just myself, but if anyone else wants to use it too, and then also long term research for the Dion project. So that's what I'm going to be working on. And I'll be streaming it, and yeah, it'll be.
And Ryan brings up a good point about sort of the focus of the jam there at the end, which is that it's in large part about making like end user software of some kind, not just some new like technical solution for something necessarily, but ideally something that more people can use, anyone can use, that actually kind of changes the face of computing or of what that concept is to people. For my own part, the project that I'm doing is sort of taking a different look at how database queries work, because I've been frustrated by SQL for a long time and find it to be a pretty inexpressive and confusing way to get data out of a system where the data should, in my opinion, be a lot more apparent. It's like really hard to sort of just explore a data set, even if you have, even if these tools are technically very good at storing all this data and answering arbitrary questions, the way you ask those questions is confusing. And the interface of the whole thing doesn't really allow you to like see the data and formulate meaningful questions about it yourself. It's all just hidden behind this weirdo syntax that's hard to learn.
Oh yeah, relational algebra. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it's really an intuitive way to think. So the project that I'm exploring then is sort of like, it's something that is designed to interface with relational databases, but to provide a look into it that's more like a sort of node graph shader editor, or like the Blender compositing workflow, if you've seen those. Although that's more of just the specific design I have in mind. The core idea is that I want you to be able to sort of incrementally build up to a complex query by starting with just a table where you can see the data, and then just start to apply transformations and steps to it and preview the results along the way.
Yeah.
Instead of doing the thing you do with SQL of just like write up a really big query, and then if it compiles, you get some results back. But like, how confident are you that you didn't mess something up along the way? How can you sort of like see the logical steps you went through to get there?
Mm-hmm.
I've made many broken SQL queries that appeared fine at first glance. And I really am frustrated that that's the kind of thing, because like the whole point of this system should be to help you accurately answer questions about all this massive amounts of data you've collected. So,
all right, cool. Azov?
I have an idea for a project/task management system that isn't a Kanban board. So I'm going to be playing with that.
Wait, is it possible to manage projects without Kanban? I didn't know there was even a possibility.
I hope so.
Okay, that's awesome.
This is actually the first I've heard about that project. I don't think you've like shared it anywhere yet.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you want to give some more specifics, or do you want to keep it like a surprise?
Well, I like dependency graphs, so it's going to be a dependency graph for the entire project, sort of. So we'll see if it breaks, or maybe it will work.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so it seems like you all have interesting things to pursue during the jam. That's neat. I'm way too busy right now with my stuff of the Software Foundation. I haven't been able even to stream lately. If I were to participate, I think I would like my biggest reinvention achievement as of late that I haven't completed yet is my Twitch chat client. It seems like a dumb idea. It kind of is of a dumb idea, but here's the thing. Twitch chat has an IRC protocol, and live coders who want to have like a terminal style thing, they don't like maybe having like a web page open to the side. I don't know. Like I'm not saying this to judge. I'm just saying this is a preference that some people have, including me. And so they want a terminal style thing, and they resort to command line IRC clients. The problem is that those IRC clients, while yes, they can understand the wire protocol, I guess, they don't understand Twitch specific concepts. So in that chat window, you can't see follows, you can't see subscriptions, you can't see people sending special messages with highlights and stuff. You can't even see emotes. So basically my reinvention thing is basically a Twitch chat client for the terminal, a TUI chat client, but that's Twitch specific, so it understands Twitch concepts, and it also allows you, for example, like if you ban somebody, this is what I was implementing last time that I worked on it. You can also you have the client delete all messages belonging to that user, which is how it's supposed to work. But I don't know. I'll try to keep working on it. I don't think I have time now. But this is just to say that I also have some thing that annoys me that I started working on just to make it better for myself.
For sure. I mean, out of curiosity, like how much time would you say you've put into that client so far?
A bit, but so in the end, I would say not that much. I think the biggest time sinks were the fact that I did most of the work on stream. And I don't know about you guys, but I get dumber while I'm streaming. Like, I think it's like going with a car with the AC on, like you start losing horsepower a little bit, right? That's the same for me doing coding like while live streaming and chatting with people. It was partially that and partially having to learn how terminal escape codes work. It's not that bad actually, especially if you don't try to like be right off the bat try to cover all kinds of weird terminals out there. But like the main one, like Xterm, once you support that, it's not that bad. So I think I spent probably, I don't know,
less than a week.
Maybe over time, no, but like if I were to just straight up work on it, not on stream and without like just with the goal of pushing it out, probably something like 1 or 2 weeks.
Sure. Yeah, that's a fun project idea because like I mean I love little things like that where it doesn't have to be some grandiose rethinking of a whole concept. It's just like I don't like this thing and I want to make this thing better.
Yeah.
So, because why not? You might still happen upon like some really nice way of doing things.
Yeah, I agree. That's a mindset that I was never able to fully understand. I mean, I'm lazy, so I understand not people that don't want to do things because it takes effort. That's fine. But there's some people that really grow comfortable into their weird tools, and that's worrying when you're from the outside and you see that happening. Yeah, I don't know if it gave the same impression to you ever.
No, I certainly agree with that. I suspect Ryan really has some opinions about that, given everything that the Dion project does. But like, you know, there's probably like there's complacency at all levels, I would say, where like you may be sort of reasonably like you may have workflows that work for you even if you don't really like them, and that's sort of hesitation to switch. But even beyond that, you could like probably go back to layers and layers of fundamentals before you and go like, well, but why do I put up with this? Is this an essential thing? Could this be better? You know? And like
Right.
no matter what, like even no matter how far back you go, it's still worth taking that time every so often to just explore them a little bit. Make, you know, go beyond just making assumptions about how ingrained they are, how difficult they are to change, and just see what could we actually do in a short amount of time if we focused on it.
I think, yeah, we should also mention, I guess, the place. I don't think we mentioned this. The place where the jam was actually coming. It came from originally this channel that we had on Discord called the Wishlist channel, and effectively, anytime that somebody would be upset, as many people usually are when they're working on computers, if somebody got upset and they're like, "I hate this program, it's terrible," then they could submit that idea to us and we would put it inside of the wishlist channel. I think it was mostly ideas that we thought of originally that were just frustrating to us. But
we definitely picked up a bunch of them over time.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
this thing sucks and I want a better version of it, you know? And
Right.
we were
Yeah.
just accumulating this list of like things people should replace because they're not great.
Right.
And yeah, that was the original inspiration for this is like, what could we do to actually like start chipping away at some of these ideas?
Yeah.
Calling it a wish list jam doesn't mean anything to anybody outside the Discord, but the idea of like reinventing wheels captures that and like is really central to a lot of the like ethos of the handmade community in general. So
Right. So I would like to maybe talk about this idea of reinventing as opposed to just rewriting. And I have an anecdote that I'd like to share. This is like my moment, you know, the inciting incident where basically the moment where I had the opportunity of doing this, reinvent rather than just rewrite. It's basically what kickstarted my the current leg of my career, I guess. So I was working in a finance tech job, and to solve one particular problem, we needed something like Bloom filters, which is a probabilistic data structure. Like, without going too much into the details, it's a very interesting way of having super compact sets. The problem is that Bloom filters don't allow you to delete items. You can only add them. And later, you can, if you want, you can rebuild the entire filter from scratch without an item as to delete it. But that's been practically very often unfeasible. Also because they are so compact that they're usually supposed to hold like stupid amounts of items that you are not able to keep, to store all in one place easily. That's the whole point of using one of these things. So we needed to be able to delete stuff, and I found a paper for cuckoo filters, which is a similar data structure when it comes to usage, different internals, but yeah, it also allows you to delete stuff. So I ended up writing a Redis module for implementing cuckoo filters, and I think I did one very clever thing, which is the authors of the paper always assumed that was supposed to be implemented as like as a library running locally on your machine. So you would invoke the cuckoo filter with a function call. While in my case, it was supposed to become a networked thing. You contact the remote Redis server and ask it to perform a cuckoo filter operation. And that brought to the picture something interesting, because since it's networked, you don't want to send the entire item to then have the server hash it, because all these systems work on hashes, as people can probably imagine. You would like to hash it beforehand. And the way cuckoo filters work, there was this very nice scheme that by tweaking slightly how things work, you could have clients do the hashing. And that's what I implemented. So that nice thing basically landed me a speaking slot at RedisConf that year. That was my first ever public talk, where I was able to talk about this. And I remember making a point of saying that the best part of my experience wasn't really rewriting things, but was rethinking the API, because that's where the fun part was. Like, re-implementing data structure was kind of tedious, actually. And from there, I guess, Redis Labs, and then Zig Software Foundation, and then here we are today. I don't know if I would be here if I didn't grab this opportunity of reinventing rather than rewriting. So that's my hero origin story.
That's a really good example, I think, of what I think a spirit that's very common to both Handmade and Zig communities, which is that understanding how the API layers on top of the lower level details. And I mean, going through that, you had to dig through the technical details in this paper of this filter. And I mean, that's a really good example of reinvention. And that could have only happened with understanding all the layers involved, so that you could rethink the API. I had a similar anecdote that's also about changing an API fundamentally, and it has to do with memory allocation. Anyone who's worked in a C-like language knows that the traditional malloc and freestyle interface is how you generally allocate memory. And I was not, I didn't invent this, but as I was kind of crash coursing myself into Handmade, I was introduced to the concept of, memory arenas, which are just linear allocators, effectively, that can sometimes they grow, sometimes they don't, but they generally have some set of properties. Like, if you push something onto the allocator, your pointer to that thing will remain stable regardless of how many more things you push onto it, that kind of thing. It's not typed or anything. Like, you can allocate any type from an arena generally. That's kind of what the word has come to mean inside of the Handmade community, at least. And then the whole idea is that the arena is sort of like a handle where you attach allocations to it. You don't do this explicitly, but it's functionally true with the linear allocator structure. And then you can free the whole thing at once. So the freeing is actually bound to the handle, not to each individual allocation that you did, which is an API concept fundamentally. And then obviously the implementation is very simple, because it's just a bump allocator. and it can be used as a stack too. And I had a coworker at some point tell me, he's like, "Do you really think you could write a better implementation of malloc and free? Like, don't you think that the developers of Clang or GCC would have done a much better job than you could have
Ooh.
developing malloc and free?" And my first thought was, well, I mean, I was a little bit, I was maybe more arrogant at the time, so I was like, I could totally write a better malloc and free implementation, but I'm not so sure now. But depends on the implementation, surely. But what was really interesting about that comment was I wasn't actually implementing malloc and free. I was implementing a much simpler allocator that can fit within 100 lines of code or something, and is faster and is actually a lot easier to use than the malloc and freestyle interface. And that required thinking through what it meant to write an allocator and to basically write the simplest one you could. And the reason why I was able to do that was because I had learned through Handmade Hero mostly, and then talking with people about it through the Handmade Network. I had understood the constraints that were implied by the malloc and free interface, which are a very different set of constraints than you can get away with most of the time.
Yeah.
In the case where you have well-defined lifetimes, in the case of a game, you always have a lifetime to worry about. There's the frame, there's the time during the, when the map is loaded. Permanent is a lifetime. There's all sorts of lifetimes that you can sort of well define, at least within a game. It gets more complicated and other problems, surely, but when you're in a lot of these cases, you can get away with this arena thing, and it was a lot simpler. And so that was a very small example of reinvention. Obviously, not necessarily exactly what we're trying to do during the jam, because we're trying to, like we've already mentioned, trying to do like user-facing products, but it is an example, I think, of rethinking an API, which requires rethinking the constraints of that the API implies about the implementation, can lead to much better things and to much simpler things. And I think that's a principle that I think has held true for me generally, is that whenever something gets better, it usually gets simpler in implementation and in API. So I think if you're not thinking about the implementation, there's no way to really simplify things. And yeah, I think so that was like a nice little simple example that I always like to share, because
and
quick.
I think what's interesting about like that question that your coworker asked is that it presumes that it's like, do you really think that you could build a better version of this existing thing? And the answer is like, well, maybe not if I'm building a clone of this existing thing. But if you build something else, maybe that actually solves your problem better. And that's
Right.
sort of a distinction of like, we're rethinking it. If we're going to go through this process of creating something, like, we can probably build a better thing, not by just doing what people before us did better, but by doing something different from what people before us did. So
yeah, makes sense. So it's a mindset, and it's not like the not invented here syndrome thing, but it's like in another dimension, there's another Loris that instead of reinventing a little bit that component, just decided to slap a Node.js instance, download a cuckoo filter library from somewhere, and that system would be jankier, maybe still running. Probably that Loris wouldn't be as happy as this one. I don't know. Well, you never know for sure, but I mean, a lot of people, you could say recently, but I'm not even sure if it's just a recent thing, but you can say that a lot of people, that's where their mind goes, when they have a problem that they have to solve. Let's add more indirection layers. Let's toss a Node.js instance in there. It's going to work for sure. But yeah, not always.
Yeah. I think ultimately the concern that always comes up whenever I sort of whenever a conversation like this happens is, businesses have requirements, they're working under time constraints or something, and I totally understand that, but I think it's really valuable to have at least some people and have a place for those people to think through these issues, because I think best things we have in computing that have lasted the longest and have allowed us to work on top of stable ground and built and reach to higher places, those have all been done in this way where they're carefully evaluating every step of the way. And I think, if you're working on an, short-term business solution, or, I mean, good example is if you're writing, simple scripts to get you to do something in some, really hacky one-off way, that's totally fine, I would say. But I think that the ratio seems imbalanced, I would say, today, where a lot of people are doing the, npm. I don't know. I don't use Node. Npm get, npm install, something.
You bash stuff together, and then you like smooth out the rough edges to make it more palatable, and then you bash stuff together with that. And you smooth it over again.
Yeah, and then it takes 5 seconds to log in, and you get bounced between 20 different websites.
Right.
Well, and then you end up in this situation where when you do want to do something different, it seems like you should, and then you get mired in these like details that pop up out of nowhere. And, that's definitely the kind of situation we would all like to avoid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree that there's economic incentive in you can't. There's a genuine problem in saying sometimes the perfect solution looks perfect to you as the, let's say, the technician, right, the technologist, but from a business perspective, it's not even remotely. That was never the point. And yeah, I agree that sometimes is a problem. I also think, like, with the job that I'm doing now at the Software Foundation, I'm realizing that this problem is not just real. I mean, I think we all kind of know that it's real. Like, you're the developer and you kind of accept it. It sucks because you would like to be able to work on cool stuff and make nice stuff, but sometimes you can't. But I think that we should really, as a profession, internalize this point a little bit better, because the importance that business decisions have on everything is so gigantic that here's my point. Once you can genuinely appreciate the nuance of business decisions, that's when you can grab the opportunity of occasionally doing the extra technical work to do the nicer thing that you would otherwise not be able to afford. So, like, if you're to put it in a bit of in simple terms, if you know at the very least what your boss cares about, you can better negotiate occasionally doing something the quicker way because the business needs it, and other times you have a better negotiating position to say, no, you know what, wait, let's do this one nice, the correct way, because there's going to be there are good reasons to do so. And I'm seeing that this is also important for open source, because it seems to me lately that people don't realize what's going on with open source projects. They don't see the money flow and how certain things are, who has the power to do what. And they only see the open source project at the end of the day being kind of sucky occasionally. And they say, well, it's just open source. I guess, yes, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like, if the people involved were smarter about business, they could have a wider range of opportunities at their hands, and they would be able to do a better job, because it's not like they don't want. Like, I think it's unfair to say that open source people don't want to do a good job. I don't know everybody, for sure not everybody, but I think there's a good chunk of people that want but can't, because they can't figure out the business side.
Yeah. I think there's something really important there about grounding your problems in reality. Fundamentally, a lot of times programmers will think that they're working in like a very abstract space that's far removed from real from any real interactions generally, I suppose. And
yeah, I don't think it's even just about like the machine it's on, if that's what you were thinking, because it's like you may just be stuck thinking like, oh, this problem's so hard to solve because of XYZ, like because of the framework I'm using, the language I'm using, the tooling. It's like, well, but what's the actual problem?
Yeah, I think all constraints need to be on the table, and that includes business constraints, that includes people constraints, that obviously includes the constraints of the tech and the computer, but I think people generally have to have a comprehensive realization of the entire problem, because the problem is to actually make the software happen, not to I guess not to lossily ignore half of the realities of doing that, and work on a really neat solution within that space, because that's not the space you're working in. So yeah, I totally agree that cash flow is one of those, or where the incentives are some of those details about the problem that you have to be aware of. And yeah, I mean, you're totally right about the negotiation point too, because obviously we as technical people care about the quality of the tech, but if you don't know how to communicate with people who are in a different space than them and they're thinking about business constraints, you'll never properly negotiate with them and come to a middle ground. Sometimes you could argue and actually, make the world that much better, because, if you're working on software that needs to be particularly safe or secure, you can argue for the quality of software, and that could change a lot of things. I think this is important, particularly as we move towards a world where everything is on software more and more, and I'd rather that look like a better future, not a worse one. But
yeah. Awesome. Any other anecdote?
I don't know if I have anecdotes exactly, but the discussion of thinking about which constraints you want to be working under, and being aware of them and making decisions based on that. That's the thing that we've been talking about a lot as we have been sort of prepping for this jam and thinking about how best to present this to people. And the way I see it, it's like if you embark on any project where you want to build a better version of something, and I'm constraining it to that because it's like that's sort of what we're looking at here, is not necessarily completely new directions. It's not like people haven't done structured editors or whatever before, or database tools before, but when you look at what exists in the space and you're thinking about how you could build a better version of it, there's going to be a lot of effort involved to actually go through the whole process of creating a replacement for something. And if you're going to go through all that effort, you don't want to constrain yourself to all the same things that the previous authors were constrained by if you don't have to. Because are you really going to go to all the effort of are you going to do all this work and make the same decisions as the previous people at every step of the way? You have an opportunity to spend the same amount of time going in a different direction instead, but really only if you are aware of the decisions that are being made, and aware of places where you could choose to diverge and hopefully discover something new and really important, which I think is the heart of that rethinking mindset, that reinventing mindset that we are trying to distinguish from just rebuilding. Because one example that we've been using leading into the jam is say that you are frustrated by Premiere because I'm not a heavy video editor, but it's a really large tool. It's got all of these workflow things that are designed for professional use cases. It's got all this crazy color gradient stuff, and a lot of people probably don't need that, and those sorts of features and the work that Premiere has to do to support them ends up sort of compromising the more basic user experience. And if you wanted a better video editor, would you really want to go through all the effort of trying to make a better Premiere clone? What makes you think that you could do really meaningfully better than Premiere, than Adobe has done on that? Or wouldn't you just be playing catch up forever and probably walking into a lot of the same traps that they did? Whereas if you back up and say I want a video editor, but I don't, do I actually need the interface for loading files to work this way? Do I need the timeline to work this way? Do I need all these, layers and levels of complexity in the UI? Do I need that, or could I actually choose to take it in a different direction? Because then if you make that kind of decision, maybe you can actually create something that differentiates itself from Premiere too. Because then how are you going to build something that's not just a bad Premiere? You have to actually
yeah,
bring it, move it in your own direction. So that's part of what we're trying to encourage with this, because there's all these things like the stuff on the wish list that Ryan mentioned, where it's like, this is really frustrating to use and I want a better version of it, but that better version should probably involve a new perspective, right? And I think that you could sort of, we've talked about having this tree of decisions almost when you are creating software, like that as in the process of creating anything, there are like all these design decisions and technical decisions that are made along the way. And there's many points where your path could diverge when you're creating this thing. And eventually you get to the end of it, the leaf sort of, where you have whatever tool it is that you're using. And if you're rebuilding it, you're going back up the tree a ways, but you could choose to go down it in a different direction. And like, it may be more work to do that, but it may be more payoff if you can like use that backing up to get to somewhere that's really like meaningfully different. Whereas like, if you're not willing to like reinvent more of it, you'll probably end up just like making something that's only slightly different. You can't actually get to a place of more meaningful invention unless you sort of like unwind more decisions. So,
right.
Yeah, I think that's also a spectrum too. The degree to which you reinvent versus rebuild something. I think there's some examples on the Handmade Network already of projects that have taken different approaches depending on the problem they're working in. So a really good example, I think, of something that's closer to rebuilding but is still fundamentally a reinvention, most notably I would say in technical decisions, would be Remedy BG, for example, which is sort of trying to build the traditional Visual Studio style debugger, but it's changing a bunch of the decisions along the way and tweaking things to make sure that it comes out a much more pleasant experience than Visual Studio has come out as. So there's a few notable design changes, notably like it's not an IDE, it's a debugger, so you can't edit your code in it. So all your text is read-only. So there's some simplifications made, and the technical decisions have been made much differently. And you can sort of tell right out of the box that the design of Remedy BG is similar to Visual Studio. Like you can, if you're familiar with how to debug in Visual Studio, it feels very similar to debug with Remedy BG. But it's a much more pleasant experience. So that's something that's closer to rebuilding. It's definitely still valuable. And then I think an alternative project that would be kind of closer to reinvention would be, I think of Silvernode, which is a raw file editor for photographers. And I don't know if anyone has seen photographers work with Lightroom, like Adobe Lightroom, but it always looks like it's this massive pain. Like every photo takes like 10 to 15 seconds to load, and then they have to go through and do the same tweaks for like, if photographer shoots a wedding or something, there's I can't even remember. I talked on the podcast about this with the creator of Silvernode, and I forgot how many photos he said. And I also know some photographers as personal friends. I don't remember how many photos they take during a wedding, but it's something crazy. So you can imagine, like, I don't know, this could be way off, but 1,000 photos times like.
You think it's only 1,000?
Okay, fair enough. I mean, like I said, who knows? But it's gonna be a lot of photos.
Yes, anyway.
Yeah, I'll simplify it. N when N is high times 15 seconds to load each one, and let's say a minute or 2 minutes if you're quick of adjusting all the color tweaks and everything. And that's like what it looked like to use Lightroom to me. And that was mind blowing to me, because I'm like, I don't know, I wouldn't have the patience for that. But Silvernode tried to go this opposite direction, where it's trying to be very smart. It's trying to be fast. So it's doing, I mean, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know anything about the technical details other than it looks a lot faster to me. Like if you watch the demos, it's very amazing compared to what you can see Lightroom do. And these are very large files.
Well, and it's not just that it is like faster to apply these edits, but that speed enables other workflows that Lightroom wouldn't do, because these like updates can happen like in completely real time. Like the author of that software has like built these workflows that allow him to like it'll sort of like analyze for batches of similar photos, and like as you step through, it is like immediately applying previous edits to the next photo intelligently, so that like as you go, you're just gradually refining the look that you want for a whole batch of photos, and just like you can just crank through them in a way that you can't in other software. And it's like that first layer of rebuilding where it's just made more performant actually sort of can cascade into other layers of it, where it's like, well, now we can actually do this different thing, and that enables us to do this different thing. Like it pulls in a really meaningfully new direction.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, speed is the difference between a photo, a slideshow, and a movie, and right, like the speed changes qualitatively, like the essence of what you're doing. I agree with Zig. There have been some people complaining about the self-hosting rewrite that we are doing, saying that it's useless waste of time. But well, clearly I think that's a dumb take. But the point is that, among other things, aside from the fact that people don't think about the developers developing the thing and their development experience, and that's actually a real thing, but also from a user perspective, so the developer using the compiler, having incremental compilation that is instant, that's amazing. Like I think when I was working with C# and Visual Studio, and rebuilding a solution would take, I don't know, 5 minutes, that thing was destroying my ability to do anything other than I'll tab on Twitter or something like that.
Yeah, it's amazing how, I mean, like, you don't even have to change the design of the tool sometimes to enable new workflows for people. As long as they can actually just do a thing and see the result and iterate, like suddenly that's a new workflow from your workflow of like start a batch job, go browse Twitter, and then come back and resume your train of thought. Like, and that's like not reinventing anything. That is just like an immediate improvement from just making it faster and better in its current design. But then you can go so much farther than that once you have that layer of improvement.
So, Asaf, is there anything that has been annoying you recently, aside, I guess, project management tools?
Oh man, most of the web.
Most of the web, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's really sad because it's so, like, it's easier to do a better job than what people are doing right now, than using all of the frameworks and all of that stuff. And I guess it technically counts as reinvention because of how far we've gone from the basics. So just doing the basics that are there, that's reinvention now.
I have this revolutionary new approach to web development where I use the APIs that have always been there.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, well, yeah, the web.
We probably shouldn't get into, although actually we have a couple people who are exploring some aspects of what you might consider the web in the jam.
Mm-hmm.
We have one person who is exploring sort of like the just general idea of a browser, and exploring some of these ideas that people have had in the past of like different approaches to linking and embedding to actually just browsing a network of information. We have another person who's going to be working more on like document layout and typesetting, which absolutely fits into the model of a browser as well. It's just it's yet another thing that they do. So it's interesting how people are choosing to like bite off different pieces of that. And that those are things that we've thought about and had on our wish list. We've had some things that are too big for the wish list, to be honest, but it'll be like, better document typesetting. It's like, okay. It's something that is definitely worth exploring though.
Ryan, do you have any other example of reinvention that you want to bring?
This isn't a personal one, but I think it's one that a lot of people are familiar with, which was everyone's familiar sort of with Dear I'm GUI these days. It's a very popular immediate mode library. A lot of people use it for, RemedyBG, which I just mentioned, uses it for the UI that it ships to users. And so it's not just a development UI thing anymore. And people are sort of familiar with the. I mean, if people have looked into it a little bit, they'll know that it came from a talk that Casey did originally. Um, but I don't even think that idea started there. I think people were doing that a long time ago. So it's sort of what Asaf was talking about in the web, where people were doing UIs like this a long time ago, and then this sort of I don't know if I want to call it a monster, but a like a very large industry trend of this like retained mode object oriented style approach to UI APIs, where you know every UI widget is an object that you construct and delete and that kind of thing. And I think that was a really good example as well of this reinvention style thing, where you're sort of thinking through the problem in its requirements with regards to reality, so what the computer actually has to do, and kind of starting from the top and not going down the roads that these other people have gone down in this sort of tree or DAG of decisions. I don't know whether it's a tree or DAG.
I don't think it's either.
Right. But yeah, and I just thought that was a good example too, that fits the idea, where you start from the top and you think through the problem, and at the end of the day you get an API or an API design philosophy, I guess, with the immediate mode UI stuff that leads to something much better than what people could have done before. I mean, DRIM GUI, a lot of people use it for development tools, and they use it for a reason, and it seems a lot better than the options that people had in the past. So I think rethinking through these things can be really effective, and I just thought that was another good example of that in the past that people would probably be familiar with.
Right. I mean, I guess the general, like the overall takeaway is that it kind of feels like, especially if you listen to some voices, big tech, that everything has been invented already, and now you just need to compose the sauces that you want in your hamburger. And but that's not exactly it. There's a few things that were fine in the past, but now they're not anymore, or not as much, because some circumstances changed, and some other things were just never really explored. And we should not really take everything for granted and just assume that it's just a matter of combining the right AWS services to get what we want.
Yeah, everything's already been invented, and we sell all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and we just happen to be selling all of them.
Yeah, it's funny how that works out. One of the things that we have in our like little introduction to the jam on the website is sort of talking about like it's pretty presumptuous to think that everything has been invented already, that there like aren't other meaningful new ideas that we can find in all kinds of domains. I mean, like when you think about how long just computers in their form at all, computers at all have been around, it's like ballpark one person's lifetime. How could you possibly think that all like serious ideas in computing would have been hit in essentially one person's lifetime?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's pretty short. I mean, like it seems like for the most part, all we've had is like an explosion of the field originally, and then just like a few waves of sort of like fads and trends as people all over the world use this, and that's kind of more or less where we are. Have we really like invented everything there is to invent in this, or explored certain things? And you can even just go back and look at historical stuff and find that there's a lot of historical ideas that, you know, fizzled out for whatever reason. But does that mean that they were doomed to fail? Not necessarily. Like, you know, many things you could argue just fizzled because of just the attitudes of people at the time. What, you know, maybe it's just like which larger companies got on board with certain ideas. I mean, like you could argue that a bunch of the decisions we have in programming today is just because Oracle or Sun had really good marketing.
Yeah.
So like
definitely.
It just it's not like we definitely have not explored the whole space. There's definitely like so much more stuff to discover if you go back and just start exploring these things.
Nice. Yep.
I think conventions expire too, because circumstances change. I mean, one of the most obvious example of circumstances changing. I mean, when you write software, you write it to solve some problem that's defined by certain circumstances. It's not an abstract problem; it's a real problem defined by real world circumstances. And when you invent something, when somebody in the '60s invented something, like feels like every invention I think I have was probably invented in the '60s for computing, and it's so. But there's a lot of things back then that were invented for certain reasons, under certain constraints, and for to solve certain problems. And I think that circumstances evolve and change over time. So there's never going to be an end of reinvention, I think. So we better get good at it now before we all forget how to program a real computer and we can no longer reinvent anymore, and then we'll be stuck right back at the beginning. Better to take what we've got, understand it, and know where to change it and how to evolve it in the future.
Yep, definitely. Well, guys, I wish you all the best of luck with the jam and your general mission, because I think we share the same mindset. Is there anything you want to say before we call it a day?
Should I just go over a few logistical things, maybe? I'm not sure that we hit it in a lot of detail, but the jam is starting on Monday, going until the following Sunday. It is a week long because we know that for some of these larger technical things, it's not the kind of thing you can do in a weekend, really, like with a game jam. It's probably the kind of thing where you want to be sleeping on it a little more often and like taking that time. So it's a little bit different pace of jam, but one that we found to work well for the jam that we did last year. So, we have some people, myself included, who are, for at least part of the time, juggling some other responsibilities with it. Some people are probably participating only for the weekend. We are not super strict about the rules for this. There's no like requirements for what tech you use, about what libraries you can use, that kind of thing. We encourage you to be careful about the technical choices you make, but since I'm talking to the Zig community, I think you're all probably in a pretty good place when it comes to that kind of thing. And it just it runs for that week. You do as much as you want on it. Share your work kind of however you want. Participate directly on the Handmade Network forums and Discord and that kind of thing. Stream on Twitch. There's some specific stuff like a hashtag you can use if you want or something. But there's not a lot of extra prep you need to do. So if this sounds at all interesting to you, if you want to participate even for a part of the time, we would absolutely love to have anybody who's interested in this community join and just tackle something that interests you.
Nice.
Yeah, I wanted to also thank you again, Loris, for having us on. It's been really good conversation and super happy to come on and chat. So thank you so much for having us.
No worries. Thank you guys for being here. That also has been very interesting. Azaf, anything else from you?
We should mention the coffee chat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
so
we're gonna be. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the conference, yeah.
You go. I've been talking too much.
Okay. So after this, we're going to do a voice chat on our Discord. We do these every once in a while. Just to talk about whatever. Today we'll probably talk about the jam, maybe some preparations, but whatever comes up, whatever people are interested in.
Awesome. I'll try to stop by if I can.
Awesome. Yeah, we should also shout out Handmade Seattle, I think. Like I said, that's being run by Abner, who founded Handmade Network, so it's very, very close to the community. And I know Andrew was there, but I guess they're virtually last year. And then I don't remember if I saw him the year before. I think he was there though, but not sure. But point is,
he's going to be there in person this year, yeah?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think so. I thought so, yeah.
Oh yeah, Andrew, yeah, he has a session.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely. People should check out Handmade Seattle. Abner is amazingly principled, and he's doing an amazing job. And I think he deserves all the support that we can give him. So I just wanted to shout him out, especially during this year. Things have been crazy. He's having to solve a lot of problems in real time, and he's taking it like I know I certainly couldn't. So he's doing a great job.
And for those who aren't familiar, the conference is going to be streamed online and happening in person. If you can't afford to travel or aren't allowed to travel or are just more interested in participating remotely, that's absolutely an option. It's online for free, but if you purchase a very, very inexpensive online ticket, you'll get access to a chat server where you can do Q&A with the speakers and that kind of thing too. So that's coming up second week of November. What are the exact dates?
Yeah, starting the 11th, I believe.
Yep.
Yep, awesome. I hope I'll be able to be there live. Fingers crossed. Well,
yeah.
Thank you everyone again. It's been a great pleasure having you here. I guess it's the end of the show. For everybody watching, enough showtime for September. We're gonna come back in October. Maybe it's gonna be a while, so you have some free time. In the meantime, I recommend you check out Zig streamers, Handmade Network streamers. Everybody's gonna be working on interesting stuff, I bet, or at least more interesting than how to deploy with Docker my C# web application. Anyway, thank you all for watching and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Awesome. See you.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.
This is how we